Welcome to Good Luck, Have Fun, the 40k YouTube channel where I talk about whatever I feel like, apparently. Today I want to talk about a revelation that took a lot of soul searching, but also led to a lot of joy. I think it's something that folks who are into Warhammer go through at some point, so I wanted to talk about it in case it resonates with some of you. Basically, I've recently realized that deep down, I'm just not really into the Imperium as a whole, aesthetically, narratively, despite exclusively playing Guard for like the better part of 2 decades. The truth is, I've always kind of hated the Imperium. I don't like the fact that a lot of Imperial characters are written so that their job is like their entire personality. It's just kind of consistently made me bored over the years. I know it's technically an accurate representation of the culture of the Imperium and the people who live in it, but
go outside, nerd.
For me, it just kind of makes for a dull narrative if the characters have no depth besides screaming for the Emperor with 9 exclamation marks. There are authors like Dan Abnett who have written 40k books that make Imperials seem more complex and layered, and I've liked those, but that kind of treatment just doesn't really come across in the narratives of most 40k stories that are out there. From official narrative events where GW has people cosplaying and role-playing actual characters from the setting, to like video games, to Warhammer Plus shows, to even marketing copy for 40k. Also, with real-world fascism breathing down my neck these days, my comfort level for evil of that nature has made the Imperium feel kind of way too real and less fun. I've had similar feelings with the Empire and Star Wars. Like, I'm not as into the idea of like playing Star Wars Legion as stormtroopers as I was when I was a young kid. I also can't watch the Cadia Stands episode of Warhammer Plus anymore, just because I find the Cadians in it to be kind of cringy. Like, they're often portrayed as being heroic while stoically embracing being cannon fodder. Like, they're victims of a regime that gaslit them into being stoked about being dehumanized and oppressed. It's mostly just kind of a bummer where it should be fun. I realize it's supposed to be satire, like the entire Imperium was written to be one big cautionary tale, but sometimes I wonder if the people writing modern 40k understand that. The overt fascist nature of the Imperium in 40k was written to satirize right-wing governments like the UK under Thatcher. A lot of people aren't good at recognizing satire, so unfortunately the irony of the Imperium's lost on a lot of folks. It also doesn't help that GW tends to portray Imperials as like the de facto good guy faction most of the time. Like, Space Marines aren't supposed to be heroic, they're supposed to be f***ing scary. They're single-minded killing machines who murder non-combatants all the time. I feel like GW tries to make them look almost like Marvel movie protagonists sometimes, and while I get that makes it easier to sell 40k to like parents, it's sanctimonious and shoots the satire in the foot, and I don't know, it kind of makes Space Marines boring to engage with, in my opinion. I want to be clear that I don't think it's like morally wrong to play Loyalist Guard or anything like that. The reason I'm making this video is just that I had come to a point personally where being able to continue enjoying the hobby meant that I had to reevaluate some things and like make some changes. Playing Imperial Guard. So when I first got into 40k, I was about like 10. I almost picked up Tau or Black Templars instead. I kind of wish that I had, honestly. It would have maybe been an easier on-ramp into the hobby than starting out with a horde of infantry when I barely knew what I was doing and I was not a fast painter. Hell, I'm still not a fast painter. So basically, I had just seen Aliens and Starship Troopers for the first time. Again, I was like 10. And I loved how the aesthetic of the Cadians kind of mirrored the human soldiers in those movies, and that's eventually what tipped me over. I also love hordes, so tanks and cannon fodder felt like kind of a fun army for me back then. Eventually, though, I had been exclusively collecting and playing Imperial Guard for about 15 years, and I got sick of them being Imperial good boys and decided to make them more interesting. So I had this idea for like a mercenary or like space pirate guard list back in 2014, but I told myself it would be too much work, and I kind of just ignored it for years. Basically, the idea is that like they're themed, modeled, painted, whatever, to look like Hive Scum or Space Pirates or something, but they use guard rules. So eventually in 2018, I decided to change my guard to being non-chaos affiliated renegade guard that were like an ex-penal legion that went AWOL. The idea for the fluff is that they fled a war zone to avoid being killed. So they organized a mutiny, stole some Imperial ships, and did a blind warp jump away. I kit bashed dozens of Counts as guardsmen and like tanks using 10 different kits to try to make all of them look as unique as possible. So it looked like they were all using like scavenged or non-standard equipment. It ended up feeling feeling a lot more satisfying than other projects with that army, and it ended up informing my aesthetic for it going forward. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was kind of the beginning of me sort of mentally being over being an Imperial player and branching out into new stuff. Playing Necrons. So Necrons are my second army, and for the past few years, they've been my favorite army. I love the idea of a game where I can command an army of like ancient undead monstrosities. The image of a monolith surrounded by a tide of silver Necron warriors has lived rent-free in my head since I was a little kid, and being able to collect and play an army of them felt like I'd come full circle in a really satisfying way. It also felt like a relief to play something different after like 20 years at that point of playing Guard. Still, part of me wanted to try out Space Marines just to see how it felt, so last year I decided to try an experiment. Painting and playing Blood Angels. So this is where the revelation like really started. I picked up the Indomitus box, which is like the 9th edition starter set, mostly for the Necrons. There's like a ton of really good Necron stuff in it for a pretty decent value. I wanted to try painting and playing Space Marines because they're, you know, the box came with like a third of a Space Marine army. So I figured, you know, I have all these models, I could sell them, or I could start a Space Marine army. I wanted to give it a try because I'd never done it before and I already had the models. It also felt interesting to dip into what is usually most people's like starter army when I was already like a decade into the hobby. So I researched the lore, I researched some color schemes, and eventually it came down to either Space Wolves or Blood Angels. I like them both, but eventually I picked Blood Angels because I was tired of working in cool color schemes. I painted a lot of greens and neutral colors and stuff like that, and I was like craving working with a warm color palette at the time. So Blood Angels were perfect for this because they have red power armor, which will never not look amazing. I've heard of artists staring at like a blank canvas or like a solid block of stone or clay and just kind of vividly seeing in their minds the finished product, exactly how they wanted it to look. So this was one of the clearest cases of that kind of phenomenon that I've ever personally experienced. I looked at the models in the Indomitus box and I was hit with this vivid feeling of like, they look like they want to be Blood Angels. That's like the best I can describe how it felt. And that whole process was enjoyable in its own way. So I painted 14 of them, I kit bashed a bunch of characters, I felt immensely proud at how they turned out. I also got really positive feedback from a ton of people, so that felt really good. I played a game with them and that went pretty well. I found them to be a pretty easy army to play. I had fun, my opponent had fun, but somehow it still just didn't feel right. After all was said and done, I realized I felt only dread when I thought forward to painting the rest of them, and that was when I realized that something was wrong. Ultimately, I realized that even when things went as well as they possibly could have, as far as attempting to paint a Space Marine army for the first time, they just didn't sing for me. By which I mean, although they looked great, I had fun painting them, I enjoyed getting compliments for them, and I enjoyed playing them, I just wasn't passionate enough to continue the project. I think it's okay to paint things just for fun without the intent of creating a whole army of them, and I think it's okay to experiment sometimes within reason. Kill Team is a good way to scratch that itch, which is part of why I'm keeping the intercessors that I have, because I can always use them for Kill Team. Realizing how uninterested I felt in Guard or Space Marines made me reevaluate my feelings for Chaos, which led to a kind of epiphany. Warming up to Chaos! So I was painting Felgor Ravagers last year, which are like the Chaos Beastmen Kill Team. A lot of people pick red as the accent color for that team on their like loincloths and armor and stuff, but I ended up going with yellow, and as I was working with them, I started to think that they would look really good as Iron Warrior auxiliaries. Months later, I watched a YouTube video from a channel called $1 Billion Clown Farm, which is a fantastic name. Also, highly recommend you check them out if you haven't. But anyway, I was watching this video where the main guy in it, Tyler, he paints an entire World Eaters army that he bought at a tournament and then entered the tournament the next day with that army. The speed painting of a Chaos army just felt weirdly appealing to me. It just seemed like a messy, fun painting project, and I realized that's what I was missing when I was painting my Blood Angels. I took a lot of time making each model look like perfect, according to my own obsessive standards, and while it was rewarding in some ways, it took forever, and I think I was kind of just missing like a quick and dirty painting project. I also realized through this whole kind of epiphany that if I'm going to have one Space Marine army, I think it's going to be Iron Warriors. Gunmetal and Hazard Stripes are, in my opinion, just peak Grimdark. It's a fantastic aesthetic that I've always been into. It's also a chance to like kit bash cool fucked up demon engines, and thus a new little Chaos cultist was born inside me. Maybe I'll talk about my thoughts about Chaos in another video. The more I embraced the idea of like I'm a Chaos guy now, the more it felt like I was breathing new life into my hobby. What does all this mean? So after years of feeling this kind of inscrutable aversion to Chaos, I finally let myself feel like it's okay to be into Chaos instead of being like married to identifying as an Imperial player. I think for a long time I felt this this weird bias against chaos where it just didn't really spark joy for me. I was really into metal in high school. I'm surprised I didn't go into chaos just purely because of that. I think maybe as a guard player, I bought too much into the tribalism of like, I'm an Imperium player versus I'm a Chaos or Xenos player, which should always be in like good fun. But I don't know. I think I just got kind of too stuck on the idea. I think an even bigger factor was probably the sunk cost fallacy, if I'm honest. I spent a lot of time and money on my guard when I was like broke in my teens and in my 20s. And after a while, it kind of started to feel like I was stuck with them. But you know what? That's okay. Sometimes we learn and grow over time in such a way that our tastes change and evolve. Sometimes we learn things about ourselves that make us reevaluate our priorities. And it can be fun to dip into something that once felt taboo because it didn't align with your interests in the past. Maybe that's how we grow as hobbyists, as people. Anyway, hopefully this helped you somehow. Hopefully you found it interesting. It felt like a profound change in my life, so I wanted to talk about it. It also felt like potentially an easy video and a hobby video. I want to make more hobby videos on this channel. Let me know when you want to see more of. I'm probably going to be making more like battle report style videos, but I also want to keep like experimenting with new formats and new ideas like this in the future. But yeah, let me know what you want to see in the comments, and maybe I'll make it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and anyway, I'm gonna go upload this video and then paint some Necrons or something. So have a nice night, stay safe, bye. I love you.